It was just another Wednesday morning in Washington. The sun peeked through Karoline Leavitt's office window as she flipped through a stack of policy briefs. She had back-to-back meetings and press inquiries to handle, but a plain white envelope on her desk caught her attention. No return address, just her name, handwritten in shaky, almost childlike letters. Karoline's fingers hesitated before opening it. Something about it felt heavier than paper. She tore it open gently, and inside was a single page. The letter began. Dear Miss Leavitt, my name is Daniel Brooks. I am currently serving a 22-year sentence at FCI Pollock in Louisiana. I know I'm not the kind of person someone like you usually hears from, but I've been following your speeches, especially the ones about second chances. I never had anyone believe in mine. Karoline's breath caught. She read on, drawn into Daniel's raw confession. He described growing up in poverty, his descent into crime, and the moment everything changed, a robbery gone wrong. But the rest of the letter wasn't about excuses. It was about transformation, about reading, praying, mentoring other inmates, and most painfully, watching his mother die from behind bars. I don't write for pity, he said. I just wanted someone to know I'm not who I was. I heard you speak about redemption. For the first time, I believed maybe I had a right to ask for it. By the time she finished reading, Karoline was silent. The usual hard edges in her expression had softened. This wasn't a political moment. It was personal. She sat back in her chair, letter in hand, stunned. Her aide knocked and entered mid-sentence about a press request. But when he saw her face, he stopped. Everything okay? Karoline looked up, the letter folded in her fingers like it might shatter. I think I need to go to Louisiana, she said quietly. He blinked. Louisiana? For what? To meet the man who wrote this, she answered. Something about this, I can't ignore it. And just like that, what started as a letter became the beginning of something no one, least of all Karoline, could have predicted. A journey into the heart of redemption, a national debate about justice and mercy, and a decision that would challenge the entire country. 3 days later, under heavy security and without alerting the press, Karoline arrived at FCI Pollock. Her black SUV rolled past the double gates, flanked by razor wire and armed guards. The prison loomed ahead like a fortress of forgotten souls. This wasn't a political stunt. No press, no cameras. Just Karoline, clutching Daniel's letter in her purse like a compass. The warden greeted her with cautious respect. Not many politicians come here, he muttered, leading her down a hallway that echoed with silence, especially not willingly. Karoline didn't respond. Her mind was fixed on the man behind the letter, Daniel Brooks, a felon, a stranger, and somehow someone whose words had stirred something in her more deeply than most debates in Congress ever had. When they reached the visiting room, Daniel was already there. He stood as she entered, tall, lean, older than his 38 years, with a weathered face and eyes that had clearly seen more than they ever should have. He wore the standard beige prison uniform, but his posture was upright, dignified. Miss Leavitt, he said, voice rough but steady. Daniel, she nodded, sitting across from him. For a long second there was only silence. Then she pulled the folded letter from her bag and laid it gently on the table. It shook me. You said you weren't asking for pity, and I believe that. But I have to ask. Why write to me? Daniel looked down, his hands clasped. Because you said something during a town hall last month. You talked about how redemption shouldn't be political. That people deserve to be judged not just by what they've done, but who they've become. I hadn't heard anyone say that in years. I thought maybe you'd listen. Karoline leaned forward. And now that I'm here? I'm still not asking for anything, Daniel said. But if people like me can be seen, truly seen, maybe others won't give up so easily. The air shifted. This wasn't a policy issue anymore. This was about human dignity. Over the next hour, they spoke about his life before prison, the choices that led him there, and the small miracles since. He ran a literacy group for younger inmates. He wrote letters for those who couldn't write. He taught GED prep. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about rewriting the future, one page at a time. When Karoline left the facility, her aides expected her to return to business as usual. But instead, she held an impromptu press briefing on the prison steps. Cameras scrambled, microphones swarmed, and she looked directly into the lens. I met a man today who reminded me that justice without mercy is vengeance. We can't fix every wrong, but we can choose to recognize change. The quote exploded across media outlets. Conservative talk shows tried to spin it. Progressives cautiously applauded. Social media lit up with questions. Why was the White House press secretary visiting a felon? Was this a pivot? A distraction? But Karoline didn't care. She wasn't trying to play a side. She was trying to start a conversation. And America was listening. Back in Washington, Karoline sat in her office, still unsettled by what she had witnessed at FCY Pollock. Her usual composure, razor-sharp, unmoved by noise, now carried a new layer of thoughtfulness. Daniel's voice lingered in her head like a song she couldn't forget, not because of its melody, but because of its truth. That evening, she did something uncharacteristic. She walked past the press room, through the East Wing, and directly to the Oval Office. President Trump, seated at his desk reviewing briefing papers, raised an eyebrow. "Karoline, this late?" "I need 5 minutes, sir." He nodded. "You've got 3. Convince me it should be more." She stepped forward and placed Daniel's letter on the desk. "You need to read this." He picked it up and scanned the first paragraph, pausing as his expression shifted. Interest, surprise, then something closer to reflection. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping the letter. "What do you want me to do about this?" he asked. Not dismissively, but seriously. "I want you to see what I saw," Karoline replied. "A man who's not asking for a handout or a headline, just a chance. A voice like his shouldn't rot behind walls forever while real predators walk free." Trump studied her face. "Are you asking me to push prison reform?" Karoline hesitated, then said, "I'm asking you not to let this country forget what redemption means. We can lead on strength and compassion. We don't have to pick one." The room was quiet for a beat. Then Trump said, "He's lucky you read that letter. Most people wouldn't." Karoline nodded. "I almost didn't." The next morning, the president mentioned Daniel's story during a press briefing, not by name, but by message. "I received a letter that reminded me, true justice includes a path back." The media erupted. Networks questioned the motivation. Was it a PR play? Was it genuine? Was Karoline trying to humanize the administration? Some liberal anchors dismissed it outright. "They want sympathy for prisoners now?" one scoffed. But the public reacted differently. Talk shows opened phone lines. Former inmates called in. Families of incarcerated people shared their own stories online. Hashtags like letters, that matter, and Second Chance America began trending. Daniel's voice, once confined to paper, was now part of a nationwide dialogue. And Karoline? She wasn't interested in applause. She was preparing for something bigger. In the following days, she met with lawmakers from both sides, quietly gathering support for a new bill focused on rehabilitative programs inside federal prisons. No cameras, no tweets, just purpose. And every night she returned to her office, lit by a single lamp, the letter always within reach. Because in a city fueled by outrage and headlines, she had chosen something different, a story that mattered. The ripple effect of Daniel's letter was far beyond what anyone predicted. What began as a single piece of paper, written by a man behind concrete walls, now echoed in the halls of power and across dinner tables nationwide. But Karoline wasn't finished, not even close. 1 week later, she stepped into the House Judiciary Subcommittee chamber. The room was tense. Cameras lined the walls, journalists scribbled in notebooks, and both Democrats and Republicans sat in high-backed chairs, skeptical and watchful. When Karoline took the seat reserved for her, a few eyebrows rose. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a senator. She was a communications expert with a fierce voice and even fiercer critics. But today, she didn't come to defend a party. She came to fight for something more human. The chairman leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt, you've requested to speak on a matter of prison reform. You have the floor." She began, her voice calm but resolute. "A few weeks ago, I received a letter from a federal inmate. Not a man claiming innocence, not a man asking for pity, a man who owned his mistakes but believed in change." She paused and scanned the room, locking eyes with a congresswoman from New York, a longtime critic of the administration. Then she continued. "His name is Daniel, and what struck me wasn't his crime or his sentence. It was his clarity, his remorse, his belief that even from the darkest place, he still had value." Murmurs stirred among the representatives. Karoline reached into her bag and pulled out a printed copy of Daniel's letter. "I'm submitting this for the record, not as a political statement, but as proof that justice and compassion are not enemies. They are two parts of the same promise." A congressman scoffed. "Miss Leavitt, are you suggesting we treat inmates like heroes?" Karoline smiled coolly. "No, sir. I'm suggesting we stop pretending they're all monsters." Her tone sharpened. "We pour billions into punishment, but pennies into rehabilitation. Then we act surprised when broken people stay broken. That's not justice. That's failure in a suit and tie." The room fell silent. One Democrat leaned forward. "And what does the administration propose?" Karoline straightened. "A bipartisan bill that funds job training, education, and mental health services inside federal prisons. I'm not here to shame the past. I'm here to fight for a future where redemption is possible." After the hearing, her testimony dominated the evening news. "Karoline Leavitt stuns Congress with a bold prison reform proposal," one headline read. Others were less kind. "Press secretary goes soft," another sneered. But Karoline wasn't fazed. That night she visited the Lincoln Memorial. No press, no entourage, just her, standing under the stone gaze of a man who once guided a nation through its greatest moral reckoning. She whispered under her breath, "You believed in the better angels. I'm trying to find them again." And in that quiet moment, she knew this story wasn't about her. It was about Daniel, and all the voices still waiting to be heard. Back in Louisiana, Daniel sat on the edge of his bunk. Unaware of the firestorm his words had sparked across the nation. No television, no access to social media, only the occasional whispers from guards and fellow inmates. "Yo, D," one inmate muttered, passing by. "They talking about you on Fox News, man." Daniel shook his head, thinking it was just another jailhouse rumor. But that evening the warden called him to the administrative office, something that never happened unless it was serious. Inside, the television was on. Daniel froze. There, on screen, was Karoline Leavitt. Sharp suit, unwavering eyes, reading his letter aloud in front of Congress. She didn't stumble. She didn't soften his words. She spoke them as if they were her own. The warden cleared his throat. "Just thought you should see it." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. He hadn't expected this. He didn't write the letter to change laws or spark national debate. He just needed someone, anyone, to understand. Now the entire country was listening. Later that night, when he returned to his cell, he pulled out the same paper he had written Karoline on. But this time, his hand trembled as he wrote, "Ms. Leavitt, I saw the hearing. I saw you stand up for me, for all of us. I don't know what I expected when I mailed that letter, but it wasn't this. You didn't have to read it. You didn't have to believe it. But you did. And now I believe in something too. Thank you. Daniel." Meanwhile, Karoline stood in her office holding a stack of letters, hundreds, from inmates, their families, prison staff, even retired judges. Some criticized her. Most praised her. But all of them were proof that something real had begun. That night, President Trump called her. "I watched the hearing," he said. Karoline waited. "You handled yourself well," he added, gruff but sincere. "Keep going." She hung up with a quiet smile. Not because of the praise, but because for once politics had stepped aside, and something deeper had taken hold. The next day, Karoline met with the Department of Justice, pitching the framework for a pilot program in 5 federal prisons. Education, job training, community mentorship. Not just slogans, but substance. And as she walked out of that meeting, she paused in the hallway. There, on the wall, was a portrait of Theodore Roosevelt. She stared at it, remembering his words. "Do what you can, with what you have, where you are." And that's exactly what she intended to do. Not everyone embraced Karoline's movement with open arms. Within 48 hours of the congressional hearing, media outlets across the political spectrum were ablaze. Conservative hardliners accused her of going soft. Liberal pundits called it performative compassion. Social media boiled with opinions, most of them loud, divisive, and increasingly personal. Fox News host Tucker McAdams said bluntly, "Karoline Leavitt might be on the wrong side of the base with this one. We elected her to speak tough, not to weep for criminals." On MSNBC, Joy Reid fired back in her nightly segment. "Karoline Leavitt is finally acknowledging the humanity in our justice system. But don't let the PR fool you. This isn't reform, it's a rebranding effort." Karoline watched it all from the quiet of her office. She didn't flinch. She didn't tweet back. She just opened another letter. This one came from a mother in Ohio. "My son is serving 20 years for a mistake he made at 19. He's not innocent, but he's not evil either. Thank you for reminding the world that our children are more than their worst moment." The next morning, Karoline walked into a White House staff meeting. The air was tense. Chief of Staff grumbled under his breath, flipping through headlines. "You're a trending topic," he said. Again. Karoline looked up. "Then we use the moment." "You've got 10 minutes with the president this afternoon," he added. "Make it count." She spent those hours crafting a proposal so sharp and tight it could cut through steel. The Second Chance Initiative, a White House-backed pilot program to support low-risk inmates through education, vocational training, and post-release mentorship. When she stepped into the Oval Office, Trump was already flipping through a draft. "This is bold," he said. "It's needed," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "You sure this won't cost us politically?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "Maybe. But real leadership isn't safe. It's right." He paused, then handed the folder to his policy chief. "Draft the rollout plan. We go live next week." Karoline walked out of that room feeling the weight of her decision, and its risk. But she also felt the current of something real pulling forward. That night, as she reviewed more letters, she found one in unfamiliar handwriting. It read, "Daniel told us what you did. He said you saw us. We believe him. We believe in you." It wasn't signed, just folded neatly and left with a single line scrawled at the bottom. "Don't stop." And Karoline knew she wouldn't. Karoline's message was spreading beyond the media and Capitol Hill. In cities and towns across the country, people who had never thought about prison reform were suddenly talking about it at kitchen tables, coffee shops, and even church gatherings. In Memphis, a former inmate named Reggie stood up in a community meeting. "I served 10 years for a mistake I made at 22. I did my time. But when I got out, there was nothing. No support, no way back in." What Karoline said? "That's the first time I felt seen by someone in power." Clips of Karoline's testimony were reshared by influencers, activists, and even unlikely allies. Rapper J Truth posted the video with a caption, "Didn't think I'd be quoting a press secretary today, but this hit hard." But with the growing support came something else, real resistance. A group of tough-on-crime senators drafted a counterbill, accusing Karoline's initiative of undermining public safety. One press release even called it a dangerous swing toward leniency. Karoline read the statement with tight eyes. She wasn't naive. She knew this moment would draw fire. Still, it was one thing to fight in front of cameras. It was another to go to battle inside the Senate. So she did. Standing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, she was calm, composed, but resolute. "This isn't about being soft on crime," she began. "It's about being smart. It's about acknowledging that a nation built on second chances must apply that principle to more than just campaign speeches. Senator Grayson, a sharp critic, leaned forward. You want to talk second chances, Miss Leavitt? What about victims? You think they care about your compassion tour? Karoline met his gaze without blinking. Victims want justice. They also want to live in a country where fewer people reoffend, because they had a real chance not to. That's what this initiative is about. A murmur moved through the chamber. Back in Louisiana, Daniel watched the hearing on a small screen in the prison library, surrounded by other inmates. He didn't say a word, but his eyes never left the screen. One whispered, "She's still fighting." Daniel just nodded. Later that night, Karoline sat in her office, exhausted. But as she scrolled through messages, one caught her eye. It was from a father. "My daughter was assaulted by someone who was released early. I was furious at the system. But then I saw your speech. I still hurt. But I also see something I hadn't before. Hope that maybe we can do better. Thank you for not pretending this is easy." Karoline sat still, absorbing every word. This wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about people, pain, redemption, and the thin thread of humanity that connected them all. She turned off her phone, looked out over the DC skyline, and whispered, "I'm not done yet." The next morning, the White House buzzed louder than usual. Cable news anchors were already labeling Karoline's testimony as the most daring challenge to establishment justice policies in years. But inside the West Wing, there were mixed reactions. Some senior advisors feared she had overstepped, pushing an emotionally charged narrative in a politically divided climate. One even warned, "You're creating a firestorm we might not be able to control." But Karoline wasn't interested in control. She was interested in change. By noon, she received a call she didn't expect. Not from a senator, not from a donor, from the warden of Louisiana's Angola prison. "Ms. Leavitt, I'm calling about Daniel." Karoline sat up straight, heart catching in her throat. "He's being released, early. Your speech triggered a reevaluation of his case, his good behavior, his letters, even his impact on other inmates. It moved the board. He'll be home within 2 weeks." Karoline couldn't speak for a moment. All she could do was nod, even though he couldn't see it. Her fingers gripped the desk as emotion washed over her. This was it. Not a headline, not a soundbite. A life changed. She immediately reached out to Daniel's mother, who answered in tears. "My son is coming home," she whispered, "because someone finally saw him." As the news broke, social media lit up again, this time with a mix of celebration and outrage. Hashtags like #Justice for Daniel and #Leavitt Effect began trending. On CNN, a panel debated the decision. "This is a political stunt," one analyst barked. "Leavitt's using a felon to win sympathy." But another countered, "This isn't a stunt. It's a story of transformation and proof that compassion and accountability can coexist." Daniel, meanwhile, was moved into transitional housing, preparing to start a job with a construction company that partnered with a re-entry nonprofit. He asked one favor before leaving prison. "I want to meet her," he said softly. "Not as a convict, but as a man. To say thank you." That meeting would come, but not yet. Karoline was preparing for something bigger. A primetime town hall, broadcast nationwide. She'd face critics, victims' families, law enforcement leaders, and formerly incarcerated citizens. No scripts, no pre-approved talking points, just truth. That evening, standing behind the curtain before walking on stage, she whispered to herself, "Let them come. I have nothing to hide, only something to build." And with that, she stepped into the spotlight. Again. The stage lights were unforgiving, bright, white, exposing. Karoline stood at the center of the town hall set, a circular platform surrounded by an audience from every walk of life. Veterans, ex-prisoners, activists, correctional officers, and skeptics. The moderator, a seasoned anchor from CBS, cleared his throat. "Tonight we discuss justice, redemption, and the price of second chances. And there's no better person to start this conversation than Karoline Leavitt. Karoline nodded, stepping up to the podium. But she didn't look at the camera. She looked at the people. All of you, she began, voice calm but steady, have a story. And stories are why we're here tonight. She didn't defend herself. She didn't attack anyone. Instead, she talked about Daniel, not his crime, but his growth, his transformation, his remorse. America isn't just a place of punishment, she said. It's a place of possibility. Or at least, it used to be. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then came the questions. A retired NYPD detective stood up, arms crossed. So what? You want us to just forgive every criminal because they say sorry? No, Karoline said, meeting his stare. I want us to judge people by their full story, not just their worst chapter. Applause broke out, but it wasn't unanimous. A mother of a murder victim stood next. My daughter was taken by someone who got a second chance. He reoffended. She didn't survive. Karoline's eyes welled. I can't imagine your pain, and nothing I say will heal that. But I promise you, I'm not advocating leniency. I'm advocating humanity. Then a man rose from the back, quiet, lean, with years in his eyes. Name's Deshawn. Spent 12 years in. Got out 3 months ago. Karoline, you didn't just speak for Daniel. You spoke for me. He took a step closer. You reminded me I'm more than my past. Gasps, then cheers. Karoline walked toward him, shaking his hand. You reminded me why I do this. By the end of the evening, the tone had shifted. The hardliners were quieter, the hopefuls louder. News anchors scrambled to rewrite headlines. Town Hall turns emotional, read one. Karoline Leavitt redefines redemption, read another. Later that night, in a quiet hallway backstage, Karoline stood alone, staring at the stage lights fading to black. This wasn't politics anymore. It was legacy. It was nearly midnight when Karoline sat alone in her Washington office, the town hall still echoing in her mind. She had taken off her heels, her yellow blazer draped over the chair, hair slightly undone. This was no longer the public figure, but the person behind it all. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. Another letter came in. You should see this one. Curious, Karoline opened the envelope. It was handwritten, neat, deliberate, and dated from a federal correctional institution in Ohio. Ms. Leavitt, you don't know me. I'm not Daniel. I'm not anyone who's ever met you, but last night I watched your town hall from my cell, and I cried. I didn't cry because I'm weak. I cried because for the first time in 19 years, I felt like I wasn't invisible. My name is Travis. I did something terrible when I was young. I don't expect forgiveness, but after hearing you speak, I remembered who I used to be before prison, before anger swallowed me whole. You reminded me I still matter. Thank you for saying what no one dares to say. For reminding this country that we're not just the sum of our mistakes. You don't owe me anything, but you gave me something anyway. Hope. She folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling. Then she stood, walked over to the small glass shelf behind her desk, and placed it right next to Daniel's first letter. 2 lives, 2 moments, and one undeniable truth. Karoline turned to the window, Washington's Capitol dome glowing in the distance. For years, she'd been framed as a firebrand, a fighter, a disruptor. But tonight, she had become something more, an advocate for the forgotten. The next morning, the press couldn't ignore the wave. From rage to redemption, Karoline's bold turn, one outlet wrote. Another simply posted a picture of her embracing Deshawn with the caption, Leavitt for the people. Fox News called it her most human moment yet. MSNBC, surprisingly, aired the full town hall unedited. Even critics grew quiet. In the days that followed, lawmakers reached out, Republicans and Democrats, curious to collaborate on criminal justice reform. And while Karoline remained cautious, she knew one thing. The walls of a prison weren't always made of stone. Sometimes they were built from silence, stigma, and apathy. And she had just started tearing them down. She stood before the mirror again that night, eyes clearer, posture taller. The country had watched her grow, not into a different person, but into a fuller one, fierce when needed, compassionate when called. As the screen faded to black, America didn't just see a politician, they saw a leader. And somewhere, behind cold bars, a man named Travis smiled for the first time in years. On Surprising Stories, we don't just tell tales of conflict, we uncover the human truth behind them. Karoline's journey from confrontation to compassion shows that sometimes the boldest acts aren't shouts across the aisle, but quiet stands for those no one hears. In a world that often discards the broken, she reminded us that redemption isn't a weakness, it's a strength. If this story moved you, subscribe and share, because the next voice that changes everything might be yours. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay surprising.